and the self-portrait. It seems to me that you were documenting, but also it was an act of love, a personal tribute to people whose work you admire.
Absolutely. I was very fortunate. A gentleman by the name of Eric Easter and another colleague photographer friend of mine, Dudley Brooks. We got together in 1988, 1989, and started working on this idea of, again, telling our story, the importance of the African-American story being told through the eyes and through the lenses of African-American photographers. Because too often the African-American story, especially the visual story, is told through several deadly ways. African-Americans are less intelligent, more violent, less universal, less patriotic. Those seem to be the 5 deadly ways that the media, really like to portray us. I knew it was different. And was very fortunate to work with Eric Easter and Dudley Brooks. And then we were then therefore able to share that idea and galvanize 50 of the best African-American photographers in the United States to do that book. That was a 3-year project where we looked at the African-American community, the self-portrait, the good, bad, and everything in between, because everything in our community is not good. And there's a lot of self-destructive, self-hate things in our community. In 1990 when we did the book, and still in 2012. So the whole idea was not to sugarcoat our issues, our problems, but to show that we are a complete people.
But what I noticed from what I've seen is that in the aesthetic, there isn't this gaze of the other. There's a certain intimacy to it, even when the images are tough, but you don't get this sense. And I think this is what we also struggle with in South Africa, where outsiders come, especially those from Europe, with preconceived ideas, and they bring the hostile anthropologist view even to the photography, where you just feel that, if they were shooting their own people, they wouldn't shoot that way.
Absolutely. You know who and I'm sure that other photographers of color will agree, give homage to Gordon Parks. Gordon Parks was my mentor. I met Gordon Parks when I was 17 years old. I was a junior in high school. And that man was nice enough to mentor me for 35 years. If you go back and you look at the collective work, Gordon Parks, Life magazine, so forth and so on, and especially those photo essays where how he covered the black community, how he did the gang story, how he did this, that, and the other story. He literally taught us, the whole generation of black photographers, how to do it with the mind and with the heart and with an objective eye. And I was very fortunate in 1995 to bring Gordon Parks to South Africa, where he critiqued and worked with a wide body of South African journalists, looked at their work and so forth and so on, and gave lectures. It was sponsored by Kodak and the United States Information Service, and of course, and Time Warner, who was also one of the sponsors of Songs My People. But I was very happy to have been able to, during that period, to bring Gordon Parks down here. And every place that we went, I think we were in Durban and Cape Town and here in Joburg. At every stop, the room was packed. And what did that tell us? That these photographers here also knew of his work.
Well, we are pleased to have his collection here. We have his books. And finally, Michael, you did 44 years to the 44th president.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at Atlanta, you look at New York, we had Mayor Dinkins, we had Mayor Andrew Young.
Mm-hmm.
We had these leaders, we had Mandela in South Africa, that prepared us in many ways almost for Mr. Obama. But I was fascinated by the extent to which when Mr. Obama became the President of the United States, the 44th President, there was suddenly this new narrative of post-race America. In South Africa, we had a similar
Same
one.
thing, 94.
94, where there was this rainbow nation, this erasure of race. And in both projects, both narratives have been fascinating to the extent that so much was invested in them. And yet, people then complained when their fantasies turned out not to be true. Say, but we've been disappointed. How was it like for you, having lived through, as you talk about 1968 at the height of the civil rights era, when there were just so much strife and hope seemed almost to be unrealistic, to watch Mr. Mandela and Mr. Obama being crowned president of their countries?
And again, that has been my blessing of being able to have been on the front seat and have a front seat at both of those events. Number one, to be in Cape Town, February 13th, 1990. Hope I got the date right.
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay, great. Whew. When Nelson Mandela was released, to see that, to do both cover stories for Ebony and Jet, pictures as well as I had the opportunity to write the cover stories. And then again, the 44th project, just a little background on that. I've been at San Jose State for a number of years, but I was there, and it was the morning after the election when I couldn't believe that some teachers were still teaching from the syllabus.
And this was on the 5th of
The
November.
5th of November
2008.
2008. And I just couldn't believe it. And I walked in my classroom and I said, the hell, we ain't talking about this today. You know, what happened last night? You know, and that's what people wanted to talk about. And it was in the course of that hour and 15-minute class that the idea was birthed. I want to take students, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, Caucasian students, to the inauguration. That's what I wanted to do. But this was a challenge. Do we just get on a plane in San Jose and fly to Washington, D.C. January 21st, whenever it was, for the inauguration, and stand in the cold, you know, and look up at a Jumbotron and witness this swearing in, or do we take it to a deeper level, especially with young people? And I'm telling you, I don't talk about this a lot, but it truly was the spirit of the ancestors that said, you didn't cover the South in the 70s for no reason. You made these contacts for a reason. I came up with the idea that we would fly, I would get a group of students, I can't remember, I may have about 12 or so, that we would fly from San Jose to Memphis, site of where Dr. King was assassinated April 4th, 1968. And we would travel through the Civil Rights South, on through Mississippi, the Delta, Jackson, Mississippi, Philadelphia, Mississippi, you know, Sworn Goodman and Cheney, on to Selma, Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, into Atlanta, Greensboro, North Carolina, the World War setting, then go to Washington, D.C. The idea came at a time of the year in the budget. This is November, all the budgets are gone and blah, 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 students have no money. We did whatever it took. We washed cars, we did whatever, we raised some money, and we went. And then another idea kicked in. We're going to do a series of stories, not just going to travel through. I want these students to do a series of stories, these young journalism students. Again, African American, Hispanic, Asian, white. We're going to do a series of stories. So we're going to retrace the civil rights path. And we're going to interview the people who were the heroes and the sheroes, as well as those who were the unsung heroes and sheroes. And lo and behold, we did. CNN covered us live every day. Every day my students had a story live on CNN about where we had gone, you know, through the Emmett Till Trail, so forth and so on. After the 10 days before, because we left on the 10th of January and we got to Washington on the 20th. That was, so I wanted the students to understand the context. That's what I wanted, and it's important to talk about that. So they understand that just didn't no black man from Chicago, you know, because he went to Harvard Law School, and he was a community activist and a lawyer, and he was a senator, and, you know, and he was biracial with an African father and a white mama, you know, and he could, you know, articulate, he can become president. Nah. Barack Obama stood on the shoulders of a lot of those black folk who 40 years earlier, the civil rights had laid down their lives so that the laws would change so that he would be able to one day become president.
The infrastructure of freedom that had been created on which it was possible for him to come
Absolutely.
with his narrative of hope.
Absolutely, and I wanted these students to get that. You know, same thing here. You know, I brought students, I was teaching University of Mississippi. I brought students from the University of Mississippi here to South Africa, you know, during, you know, the post-apartheid, because I wanted them to see, you know, this was 2005. I wanted students to see, and we wrote stories and we did interviews, the things that had changed, what the expectations were the expectations met, and were the expectations not met. And of course, as in Dr. King's last book that was published after his death, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? If we keep coming back to that, get Dr. King's last book, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And in that book, read the chapter called The World House. And if you read the chapter called The World House that Dr. King wrote 66, 67, 68, published, you know, after his death, if you read the chapter called The World House, you will read it as if you wrote it yesterday.
Michael D. Cheers, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you. I do a lot of these interviews. This has been one of the most moving, deeply inspirational. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
And author with Hugh Masekela of Still Grazing, a really amazing man with a great deal of love for the people that he covers. And I think a lot of journalists could learn from what you do, which is don't just cover the story, connect with the human beings behind the story.
Absolutely. And a quick plug, 2014, look out for our next book, Hugh Masekela, An Illustrated Life. You know, that's the book that